So the guys that were providing the jobs in the cities were Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and Morgan. I mean, if you worked in the city, chances are you worked on one of their factories. Now, these guys were insanely wealthy. It's always the people who own the business that are richer than the people who work at the business, and this will become a problem. All right. They're known as one of two things: captains of industry or robber barons. Now, you want to be known as a captain of industry. Captain of industry means you're a guy that has invented something, revolutionized something, and you're improving the world with what you provided. If you're known as a robber baron, you are seen as a wealthy person who is stealing from the poorer folk, either by not paying them a fair wage or not improving their life any. Now, these guys lived in something called the Gilded Age. Now, to gild something means to coat it in gold. And for these mega wealthy billionaires, this certainly was a gilded age for them. But at the same time, at what expense is their gilded age coming? We become very, very aware that there is income disparity, that these guys are making billions off the back-breaking work of the people who are working for maybe 10 cents to $1 per day. They had lavish lifestyles. They had giant mansions. They had electricity. Compare that to the workers who are living in tenements and slums, and you just start seeing more and more drift. They also had ruthless business practices. They formed monopolies and trusts. And if you have a monopoly, you own every part of a business. For example, Rockefeller owned 90% of all the oil in the United States. And this becomes a problem because if one person owns all the oil, then there's no competition to drive down prices. And that gets reflected upon people who need to buy the oil. Now, these guys would provide pretty unsafe working conditions and environments. And it wasn't just them, like every different type of business took advantage of these. You probably see these little boys working, okay? You could hire people under the age of 16 to work in factories all day. These young women were most likely immigrants who couldn't speak English and needed a job. They are working at their sewing machines. There's probably about 200 to 300 young women in this room. And if you look at the windows, those don't open. We don't see ceiling fans. We barely even see exits. Okay, I think there's one exit all the way in the back, right about there. So think about what's going to happen if this workspace caught on fire. Okay, there was a very real incident called the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire where young women died. Well, workplaces were highly, highly unsafe. An employer could make you work for hours on end without a day's off. They were vastly underpaying you, and if you got hurt or injured, they could just fire you. So what did all this industrialization do to people? There were long hours and low wages, especially for women and children, who was easier to take advantage of. There was no job security or benefits. If you got hurt, there was no working men's compensation. There was no social security. Okay, if you got hurt, probably you got fired, and then they hired the next person. There were dangerous working conditions, including, like I mentioned, the Triangle Shirtwaist Company fire and work-related illnesses such as lung disease. And there were also things set up called company towns, where you lived in a company town, your company paid you in company credit, and you used your company credit to keep paying to live in that company town. You had a company store where you could only spend company money to get company food. So essentially, they were holding you in borderline slavery. So things had to change to improve the lives of workers.